Senior advocate Mahesh Jethmalani is joining us live. Mr. Jethmalani, I appreciate your time. Mahua Moitra expelled from the parliament. Questions are being raised on the procedure, the processes. As a senior advocate, my question is, was Mahua Moitra given a fair trial and were the principles of natural justice followed?
Well, the ethics committee has its own procedure, right? And I think that the procedure prescribed by Parliament itself for the ethics committee, which was finally, I think, finalized in 2015, I think that was followed. That procedure which prevails, for instance, in the even as far back as the old case of Raja Rampal, where there were cash for questions caught by a sting operation, right? The same procedure was followed, right? And the Supreme Court, a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court held that the procedure followed, and that procedure did not include, for instance, cross-examination. The same procedure was followed in that constitutional bench judgment, and they also held that there was a power of expulsion. So going by precedent, I can't say anything. I don't want to be unfair. Look, let me tell you something. This is a very sensitive issue. It'll lay down precedents for the future. But there is a precedent in the past, as I said, Raja Rampal's case, right? So going by that single precedent, cash for questions is an extremely, or consideration for questions is an extremely grave matter. And I haven't read the whole report, to be fair. So to be fair to both sides, I haven't read the whole report. It's a lengthy report. But the procedure seems to have been followed, right? I think, therefore, the question of natural justice also has been complied with.
Okay. The ethics panel report, Mr. Jethmalani, says that the cash has to be investigated by a government agency because that's really not their domain. That the cash trail has to be established, and that is a subject of investigation. What next, according to you, in this entire probe?
Well, I mean, I think that they've recommended, that this matter be investigated by, a high-powered institutional, agency. So I suppose that the next stage, and there's also a complaint pending before the CBI. I think Dehadrai, who initiated the privilege motion, right, or sent it to Nishikant Dubey, right, because it requires that any complaint be forwarded by a member of parliament, has also filed a complaint to the CBI, which I've actually read. It's in the public domain. So the next stage will be to find out. Look, you've got to understand one thing. Parliament has a domain. Now, of course, many times people think that, it's brute majority and all that. But without being judgmental in this whole case, it doesn't have to get proof beyond reasonable doubt. It has to be a strong prima facie case, right? And look, I don't think Dehadrai was cross-examined. He made statements. Nishikant Dubey, of course, doesn't have personal knowledge, right? He's only the formal complainant, the formal, the member who passed on the complaint to the speaker. So now a lot of Dehadrai's statements go unchallenged, right? And the procedure for cross-examination doesn't exist in any event. Now, what I understand is, I mean, look, I want to say that I have only a very sketchy idea of what transpired because I wasn't in India when, this whole thing happened. But I'm told that some questions were asked which Ms. Moitra considered to be, smacking of misogyny, right? And therefore she stormed out of the proceedings, right? Now, and that's the reason why the proceedings terminated. So in a sense, there were all kinds of allegations made, not just by her, but by other minority members who finally filed a minority, a dissenting opinion in the final report. So if Ms. Moitra felt that questions were being unfairly asked, right, The answer to misogyny, right, is to take it head on. I thought that was what had been expected from someone like Ms. Moitra, right? In fact, in fact, she got indignant and refused to, proceed further with the hearing. So, in a sense, partly this is self-inflicted also, right? So procedure is complied with. There have been allegations, right? There's an affidavit of a man, right, who's actually the key figure, Darshan Hiranandani, and I've read his affidavit. And the affidavit does disclose a case of quid pro quo, right?
Mr. Jethmalani, Darshan Hirandani's own affidavit, as you were talking about it, is seen as the clinching evidence. Some opposition MPs are of the opinion that Mahua Moitra should have been given a chance to cross-examine, or he should have been summoned by the panel.
Well, as I said, there are two things here. The rules of procedure do not provide for cross-examination. And as I said, there's a precedent in the constitutional bench case, which dealt with expulsion of 9 Lok Sabha members and 2 Rajya Sabha members for taking cash for questions, right? Allegations were the same. There was no right of cross-examination offered to them. The procedure did not prescribe it. And in the end, the Supreme Court did not consider it to be a fatal aspect. The view of the Ethics Committee upheld by the Lok Sabha at large, right, was upheld by the Supreme Court. The expulsion was upheld, minus that cross-examination. Now, listen, I'll just tell you one more thing, right? And again, I don't want to be unfair, right? But there are some things here. There is a man called Darshan Hiranandani who has made an affidavit. Now, Darshan Hiranandani stands to lose a lot because prima facie he's implicated himself as a bribe giver in the Prevention of Corruption Act proceedings that may ensue, right, or be investigated by the CBI. This man has already given evidence which implicates himself as a bribe giver, right? If he is not made an approver subsequently, it's a confession of guilt. And that's entitled to, that would have weighed, I imagine, it would have weighed with the Ethics Committee, right? That here's a man who's a bribe giver in the eyes of the law, liable for punishment unless he's made an approver, right? And therefore, his evidence is entitled to a considerable degree of weight, right? Now, on the merits of the matter, again, this is all very sketchy, right? My views, since you asked me to come, notwithstanding my limited perspective, both on facts and the events that have, followed subsequently. Again, on merits, right? Darshan has said that he was forced to give. Now, that's his evidence. He was forced to give vast amounts of gifts to her, right? And he also sort of, furnished her house and so on and so forth. Ms. Moitra, on the other hand, plays down the extent. She doesn't deny. She doesn't deny there was consideration. But she said there was an Hermes scarf and there were, right? But quid pro quo is not about the quantum of consideration, right? So there's some admission there as well. Now, please understand that the Ethics Committee doesn't judge you on criminal law and your guilt as a criminal. It's not a question of law or crime. The Ethics Committee is concerned with moral and ethical behavior of an MP, right? Therefore, normal standards to a court of law do not apply to Ethics Committee, notwithstanding the fact that the outcome is drastic, i.e. expulsion.